Greetings, fellow travellers. Tonight we walk into the shattered streets of London, where bombs fell from the sky, and not all of them chose to explode. The air is thick with dust. Windows gape like broken teeth, and whole blocks sit in silence, waiting for the next strike. Beneath the rubble, steel monsters lie half-buried, sleeping but not dead, their fuses whispering in the dark. This is not a battlefield with banners or bugles, it is a waiting game, where one wrong breath can wake the earth itself. And into this silence, a handful of men are sent, tasked with silencing what the city dares not touch. But before we step closer to the fuse, settle in for a moment. Breathe. The silence after the raids is heavier than the bombing itself, pressing down on broken brick and empty windows. Picture yourself stepping into that silence, boots sinking into wet ash, hands brushing aside the rubble. You are not here to fight, but to listen to kneel before a buried charge and gamble that your touch will not be the one that wakes it. And while we walk this path together, if you'd like to keep uncovering these forgotten labours of history with me, a quick like or subscribe helps carry these stories further than one voice alone ever could. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. It's a reminder that even in the heaviest silences, we're connected across time and distance. And so, you kneel. Your fingers ache even before they find the steel. The bomb is cold to the touch, though the earth around it is warm with the memory of fire. Its surface is dented, scratched, streaked with soot, but the fuse remains untouched, gleaming faintly in the half-light. A single screw, a thin thread of wire, and 500 pounds of high explosive beneath. You run your thumb along the casing and feel the faintest vibration inside, like a heartbeat you wish you couldn't hear. The air tastes metallic, as if you're breathing rust. Dust grits between your teeth when you swallow. Somewhere behind you, a drip of water plinks steadily from a broken pipe, each drop echoing like a countdown. The street around you is deserted, yet you can feel eyes, neighbours hiding behind shutters, soldiers waiting just out of sight, everyone knowing that their tomorrow depends on what your hands choose to do now. Your tools rattle in their satchel, a hammer, a spanner, a pair of wire cutters worn smooth by desperate fingers. Nothing glorious, nothing polished, just scraps of metal against a machine designed to erase streets. Still, these are all you have, and you steady them, as though they might steady you in return. You press your ear close, the damp earth cooling your cheek. There it is again, the whisper, so faint it might be your imagination. But no, it's there, just beneath the casing. The fuse is alive, waiting, choosing, and now it listens for you. The moment deserves its pause. To understand why men knelt before live bombs, you must first see the world that created them. London in the autumn of 1940 was a city caught between fire and silence. Its days ordinary, its nights apocalyptic. Every evening the sirens would wail, families clutching one another as they hurried underground. And then the sky itself would roar waves of German bombers sweeping in, dropping fire and steel across the capital until whole streets dissolved into dust. When the planes retreated and the fires dimmed, the danger was not over. Thousands of their gifts lay buried in earth and brick. Unexploded bombs, each one unpredictable, each one as lethal as the moment it fell. The newspapers called them UXBs. To civilians, they were nightmares made of iron, waiting to decide whether they would destroy your home tonight, tomorrow, or not at all. The task of dealing with these silent threats fell to a newly created branch, the bomb disposal units of the Royal Engineers. They were not chosen for bravery, at least not at first. In truth, they were often men with some mechanical skill, engineers, or unlucky draftees who had touched machinery before. A spanner in one life became a tool of survival in another. Training was brief, manuals thinner still. The bombs they faced changed faster than any textbook could keep pace with. Their world was absurd in its simplicity. The German Luftwaffe would experiment constantly with new fuses, some designed to delay detonation by hours or days, others rigged to explode the moment anyone tampered with them. The UXB men were handed a sketch or rumour of what they might face, then told to get on with it. To be clear, there was no science fiction magic here, no intricate laboratories. It was a man with a screwdriver kneeling in the rubble, often guessing at which screw to turn first. The risks were obvious, and the toll was merciless. A report from the time noted that entire units would sometimes last only a few weeks before being wiped out. In 1940 alone, hundreds of bomb disposal men were killed in the line of duty, many reduced to a crater, with no name left to bury. Yet more volunteers kept stepping forward, perhaps out of duty, perhaps because someone had to. To the rest of the city, their work was invisible. When a pilot shot down an enemy aircraft, there were parades. When a UXB man carried a live bomb through the streets, there was only silence, and the held breath of every family watching through the cracks in their shutters. Success meant nothing happened. Failure meant no one was left to tell the tale. And yet, without them, London would not have survived the Blitz. The homes, cathedrals, and factories that endured did so because men, with no promise of glory, knelt in the dust and dared to touch death with their hands. Picture it again. A London street half collapsed, children's toys still scattered in the rubble, and there, beneath what was once a bedroom wall, the curved body of a bomb. It is absurd in its stillness. Something meant to arrive like thunder sits quiet as a buried log, its paint dulled by dirt, its insides waiting. A disposal man crouches, head tilted, listening for a sound only he knows how to fear. And as he does, the questions rise. What fuse is this? What trick lies waiting inside? These questions haunted every call-out. The Germans were clever, relentless. Some fuses were built with delayed timers. The bomb would lie harmless for hours before erupting in the middle of a rescue effort. Others were designed to kill the very men sent to disarm them. Small mechanisms that triggered only when tampered with. And so each approach felt like a duel with an enemy engineer. A man you would never meet, but whose hands you felt guiding the screws beneath your own. Microscenes flickered across the city, each one as tense as the last. In Holborn, a team spent 2 days digging out a 1,000-kilo bomb from the clay, its size so massive the earth itself seemed to sweat around it. In East Ham, another squad pulled a bomb from a factory floor while workers watched, frozen in place, their livelihoods balanced on a single fuse. In Southwark, a church stood untouched, except for the iron nose jutting through its nave, a bomb that had fallen straight through the roof but chosen not to ignite. Parishioners prayed while men in overalls argued over how to approach it. Between each of these scenes came only scraps of instruction. Intelligence officers passed sketches, half-drawn diagrams of new fuse types with notes scrawled in pencil. Possible mercury switch. Unknown secondary charge. Do not touch here. The UXB men would glance at the page, then at the bomb itself, and know that whatever choice they made next might be their last. The city lived in suspense, and so did they. Crowds sometimes gathered at a distance, silent as funerals, watching men dig down to the waiting monster. A hush would spread, neighbours holding hands, a city holding its breath, and when at last the men emerged with the fuse in hand, the crowd often broke not into cheers, but into weary exhalation, the sound of fear easing only for a moment, before the next siren wailed. What happens next is the question that kept them moving. The bomb in front of you was only the one you could see. Others fell every night, burying themselves in gardens, schools, rail yards. There was no end, no final task. Every success led only to another silent street, another iron cylinder waiting to be coaxed into surrender. And still, they went. By day, The city looked bruised but alive. Smoke still curled from chimneys. Buses still rattled down battered streets, and children still clutched gas masks on their way to school. But for the UXB men, the hours between raids were not reprieve, they were labour. The night gave them rubble, and the day demanded its clearance. Every morning brought new reports. Bombs in gardens, bombs in warehouses, bombs lodged like teeth in the walls of homes where families once slept. Their routine was not the glory of pilots racing Spitfires across the sky. It was mud, sweat, and paperwork scrawled with shaking hands. Wake before dawn. Report to headquarters. Collect the day's assignments. Pack the satchel. Wire cutters, spanner, screwdriver, chalk, rope, and little else. Then into the lorry, bouncing across cratered roads to wherever the latest iron guest had buried itself. The tools felt meagre because they were meagre. There was no special bomb disposal kit. Not in those early months. A carpenter might recognize them, a plumber too. Yet with these, a man was expected to outwit the most cunning engineers of the Reich. They developed their own rituals, small defenses against the weight of fear, a mug of cold tea before stepping off the truck, a scrap of black humour tossed between comrades. Don't touch the shiny bit, Bill, or I'll be scraping you off me boots. A cigarette smoked down to the filter before lowering into the hole. Even the way they carried the satchel became habit slung on the left, never the right, as if one shoulder could carry luck more steadily than the other. But the world around them did not share in their routines. To most Londoners, the UXB men were shadows, who arrived at night and vanished by morning. When they succeeded, nothing happened, which meant no headlines, no parades. The reward for silencing a bomb was only silence in return. And yet, when they failed, the crater left behind was its own obituary. Entire streets bore witness to the absence of men whose names were quickly forgotten. Still, seeds of conflict grew quietly. Some officers demanded speed. Clear the bombs quickly, so transport could resume, factories could reopen, life could carry on. But the men knew haste was its own enemy. A rushed screw could mean a dead team. Arguments brewed in rubble-strewn alleys, commanders barking for results, sappers muttering that they'd rather go slow and walk home alive. The tension was constant, not only between man and bomb, but between duty and survival. Yet even in this strange life, moments of tenderness pierced through. A shopkeeper handing over her last loaf of bread to a disposal squad after they carried a bomb from her cellar. A boy pressing a button from a diffused fuse into a soldier's palm, calling it a lucky charm. Small exchanges, fragile but human, made the absurdity bearable. This was their world. Unseen labour, improvised rituals, pressure from above, and a city that only noticed them in their absence. And in the middle of it all, the steady hum of bombs, still buried, waiting for the next set of trembling hands. The war never stayed still, and neither did the bombs. Just when the men began to think they understood their enemy's tricks, the Germans changed the game. It started with rumours passed from unit to unit. A new fuse, one that behaved differently, one that waited. At first, the whispers were dismissed. Every bomb felt like a trick already. But soon enough, truth came buried in clay and concrete. A disposal squad in Kent dug down to an ordinary-looking cylinder, its nose lodged in soft earth. They worked as usual. Clear the rubble, expose the casing, find the fuse. But when the spanner touched the screw, the ground erupted, leaving nothing but a smoking crater where 3 men had been kneeling. No one had heard a ticking. No one had seen a trap. Something inside had been built to punish curiosity. The official name was the Type 17 fuse, though the men called it something darker, the booby trap. Unlike earlier models, it wasn't meant to go off on impact or after a set delay. It was designed to sit and wait for the very hands that would dare to touch it. Inside was a simple mechanism, a glass ampule of acid that slowly ate through a retaining wire. If the bomb wasn't diffused quickly, the wire would fail, and the weapon would explode at random. Worse still, some were rigged with anti-handling devices, meaning any attempt to remove the fuse triggered instant detonation. This revelation turned an already impossible job into a nightmare. Men who had once approached a bomb with steady nerves now felt their confidence fray. How could you kneel before a machine that might erupt whether you touched it or not? Every screw became suspect, every sound a possible warning. There were reports of men digging halfway down, only to abandon the task, choosing discipline over certain death. Others smoked 2-3 cigarettes in a row before daring to bend close, as if nicotine could steady hands against inevitability. The twist was crueler still. Command demanded speed. The new fuses meant bombs could not be left for hours or days. They had to be handled quickly, or not at all. This placed men in a vice. Rush, and risk a slip of the hand. Delay, and risk the bomb exploding on its own. There was no right answer, only a narrowing of options, and the tightening of fear. The city noticed the change too. Crowds that once stood quietly in suspense now kept their distance. Families would evacuate entire streets rather than remain near a booby trap. The silence grew deeper, the loneliness heavier. Even among the UXB men, a grim lottery seemed at play. Who would be the next name? Spoken only in whispers. And yet, they kept kneeling, because if they didn't, the bombs would choose their victims anyway. After the booby trap fuses appeared, the rhythm of a UXB man's day changed. The work had always been tense, but now it carried a new urgency, as if time itself had turned traitor. Reports came faster than ever. Unexploded bombs in schoolyards, in hospital courtyards, in the middle of rail lines that had to reopen by dawn. Each call-out was a race against an invisible clock. The fuse inside, slowly eating through its own restraint. The men moved more quickly, though speed was their enemy. Trucks roared through streets still smouldering from the night before, engines rattling over cobblestones split by fire. Sappers jumped down, boots splashing in puddles where fire hoses had turned ash to sludge. There was no time for cigarettes, no time for banter. A bomb could be stable for hours, or it could detonate in minutes. Nobody knew which, until it was too late. The sensory details of the work became sharper, crueler. Fingers blistered from digging hot rubble with bare hands, when shovels would have risked striking the casing. The smell of petrol from nearby fires clung to their clothes, mixing with sweat and dust until it seemed their very skin reeked of war. Every sound carried threat. The clink of a spanner, the snap of a brick shifting underfoot, the faint hiss of escaping gas from cracked pipes. And beneath it all, the imagined whisper, was that the fuse? Or your heartbeat pounding in your ears? The psychological toll escalated too. Men who had once joked on the way to jobs now sat silent in the lorry, staring out at the city with hollow eyes. Letters home became shorter, often little more than, "Still alive. Hope you are too." Others wrote long farewells and carried them folded in their breast pocket, knowing a comrade might be the one to deliver them. Even the smallest tasks felt like tests of endurance. A bomb in a railway station had to be lifted and carried on makeshift slings, each man feeling the weight drag his shoulders lower while imagining the steel casing heating in his grip. Another, lodged in a hospital basement, forced sappers to work hunched over in a stinking dark corridor, water dripping onto their helmets as patients prayed above. Orders from command grew sharper, the pressure constant. Factories could not stop, trains could not halt. Life in London could not afford to freeze because of buried iron. Clear it. Quickly. That was the refrain. But quickly meant mistakes, and mistakes meant craters. Men muttered under their breath, but still they obeyed. Escalation was not just in the bombs. but in the men themselves. Hands shook more violently, tempers snapped faster. Yet still they carried on, caught between duty and dread, between silence and eruption. And the city, oblivious in its gratitude, asked only for tomorrow, to dawn with one less bomb, waiting in the dark. The call came on a cold morning, smoke still hanging low over the city. A bomb had struck near the heart of London, not in some distant suburb, but beside its most enduring landmark, St. Paul's Cathedral. By sheer chance, the dome still stood, rising pale and defiant above a sea of rubble. The newspapers whispered that as long as the cathedral survived, so too would London. Now a single unexploded bomb threatened to turn that symbol into ash. The lorry rattled through streets lined with shattered brick and sandbags. When the team arrived, crowds had already gathered at the barricades. Silent, wide-eyed, they stood as if waiting for a sermon. For many, St. Paul's was more than stone. It was the last promise that something of their city would endure. And now that promise rested in the hands of men who carried nothing more than satchels of spanners and wire cutters. The crater was deep, filled with muddy water and splintered timbers. At the bottom lay the bomb, nose down, its tail fins jutting upward, like a marker over a grave. The disposal men climbed down carefully, boots sinking into muck, their breaths frosting in the cold air. The walls of the pit loomed above them, slick and unstable. A wrong step could send the earth collapsing, burying them alive before the bomb had the chance. They worked in silence. One man baled water with a tin pail, passing it up hand over hand. Another cleared debris from around the casing, his gloves soaked through, fingers numbed by the cold. The officer in charge leaned close to the fuse, his ear tilted as if trying to hear the heartbeat of the enemy. Above, the crowd held still, not daring to cough. The dome of St. Paul's seemed to watch as well, its great stone ribs silent under the grey sky. Every detail magnified itself. The scrape of metal on metal when a wrench slipped, the trickle of mud slumping down the side of the pit, the faint creak of the bomb casing as it settled deeper into the clay. To the men crouched over it, each sound felt like the beginning of an explosion. They worked with teeth gritted, each motion precise, deliberate, but the knowledge pressed harder. One slip, and the heart of London would be gone. The strain pushed them to the brink. Hands trembled despite every effort at control. Muscles cramped from crouching too long. Yet no one dared to shift position. They could feel the eyes of the city on them, the weight of history above their heads, and the merciless ticking of time inside the earth. And then came the moment. The officer braced himself, screwdriver poised against the fuse. One twist would decide it all. The lives in the pit, the crowds at the barricade, the survival of the cathedral itself. He drew in a breath, held it, and pressed. The crowd waited. The city waited. History itself seemed to hold still. The screwdriver slipped into place with a faint metallic click. No thunder, no roar, only silence so deep it pressed on the eardrums. The officer's breath came shallow, measured in inches. He did not dare swallow, did not dare blink. Every nerve in his body strained toward the thread of metal before him, a fuse designed by men he would never meet, waiting to judge his steadiness. The crowd above leaned closer without moving. Not a cough, not a shuffle of feet. Even the pigeons circling the dome seemed to hold themselves aloft in silence. The city's heartbeat had shrunk to this pit, this moment, this single turn of steel on steel. The officer twisted, slow as the hand of a clock. The screw resisted, then yielded with a faint groan. He froze, sweat stinging his eyes, muscles locked in terror that the next sound would be his last. A second man reached forward with the cutters, their jaws trembling as much as his fingers. The fuse sat stubborn, its mechanism hidden, its decision unreadable. Time slowed into fragments. A bead of water slid from the side of the pit, landing with a splash so loud it seemed to echo like a cannon. The officer's hand clenched tighter. One more turn, one more breath. Beneath his knees, the earth seemed to throb with the weight of the bomb's silence. And then release. The screw came free. The fuse loosened. For an instant, no one believed it. The officer cradled the small metal piece in his palm, his breath ragged, his face streaked with grime. The fuse was still warm, as though alive, but its power was gone. Above, the crowd erupted not with cheers, but with gasps, sobs, the sound of breath restored after too long withheld. Men clasped hands, women covered their mouths, children clutched at their mothers' skirts. They had not witnessed victory, but survival, and in that survival, a kind of miracle. The men in the pit did not smile. They climbed slowly, their bodies aching from crouching in mud for hours, their eyes empty with exhaustion. The officer held the fuse aloft for the waiting soldiers, who whisked it away like undertakers with a coffin. The bomb, now a hollow shell, would be hauled out later, dragged from its grave like a carcass. For now, the pit was only mud and silence. The dome of street pools loomed above them, untouched, white against the soot-stained sky. It seemed to shine brighter for having come so close to loss. The newspapers would soon print the photograph, the cathedral rising from smoke and rubble, a symbol of endurance. But the men who had saved it would not be named. Their work remained, as always, unseen. And yet, in that moment, as the crowd exhaled and the officer wiped the sweat from his brow, London still stood. When the fuse was gone and the bomb lay silent, the world seemed to move again. Soldiers rushed forward with ropes and pulleys, their boots splashing mud as they prepared to haul the massive shell from its grave. The crowd, once frozen in dread, began to murmur some whispering prayers of thanks, others simply staring as though unsure if what they had witnessed had truly ended. A child clapped once before his mother pulled him close, as though noise itself might wake the bomb after all. The men who had done the work did not linger. They climbed from the pit, their clothes soaked through, their faces smeared with grime. Their hands shook too much to light cigarettes, so they sat on the edge of the lorry, breathing hard, mud dripping from their boots. They had lived, but living did not feel like triumph. One muttered, "Next time will be the one," and no one argued. Survival was temporary, fragile, and they all knew it. For the city, however, it was different. By evening the newspapers would carry the story, bomb defused near street pools. Photographs of the cathedral rising through smoke would circle the world, a symbol that London's heart still beat. Politicians would speak of courage and resolve, of the city unbroken by the enemy. Yet the names of the men who had knelt in that pit would not appear. Their work, by its nature, was meant to vanish into silence. If they succeeded, nothing happened. If they failed, there was no one left to write the story. Back at their quarters, the rituals of recovery began. Boots were scraped clean, tools wiped down, satchels repacked for the next call-out. Some men wrote quick notes home, just a line or two. Still alive. Cold tea waiting. Yours, J. Others stared at their hands, still trembling, wondering how many more times those hands could remain steady. A few drank themselves to sleep, the taste of dust and rust still coating their tongues. The irony weighed heavy. Their greatest victory was invisible. A cathedral stood, a crowd exhaled, but tomorrow there would be another bomb, another pit, another silent duel with death. Their work did not earn medals or parades, only the unmarked gratitude of strangers who never learned their names. To be a UXB man was to vanish behind the success of survival itself. And yet, in the quiet after the crowd had dispersed, in the echo of footsteps down ruined streets, They carried something few others could claim, the knowledge that they had held the line, not with rifles or cannons, but with bare hands on live steel. They had touched death and lived, but tomorrow it would wait again. Return now to the image where we began. A man kneeling in the rubble, cheek pressed to the damp earth, ear straining for a whisper inside the steel. That moment was never rare, never unique. It repeated itself across London night after night, street after street. Each bomb was different, each fuse a new riddle, but the ritual was always the same. Kneel, listen, trust your trembling hands against the silence. The city never saw those details. To most, the work of bomb disposal was invisible, folded into the background of survival. They remembered the air raids, the sirens, the domes of fire above rooftops. They remembered the photographs of street pools still standing, but few remembered the men who had leaned over cold steel, screwdriver biting into stubborn screws, lungs filled with dust, praying for steady breath. Their heroism was measured not in medals or monuments, but in the absence of catastrophe. And so, the hook returns. The whisper beneath your hands. The bomb waiting. This is what it meant to be a UXB man, to live perpetually in that suspended second before the explosion. To dwell in a silence that might, at any moment, break into fire. Your body aches with the weight of crouching. Your mouth tastes of rust. Your heart stammers against your ribs. And still you turn the screw. Still you cut the wire. Still you place your life between the city and the abyss. There is no audience for this work. No certain ending. One day you walk away. Another you vanish into the crater. The earth keeps its secrets. And history remembers only that the cathedral stood. The trains ran. The factories lived to make another day's munitions. The rest. The sweat. The silence. The unseen gamble of men on their knees, before death fades into dust with the bombs themselves. Yet in that moment, as the casing hums faintly against your palm, you understand something the rest of the world does not. Survival itself is the miracle. To hold back oblivion with nothing but spanners and nerve is to know both the fragility and the endurance of life more intimately than most ever will. And so you kneel again, screwdriver poised, listening for the whisper. The city waits above, unaware. The fuse waits below, patient. And you, caught between, steady your breath. Because this is what it meant to be a UXB man, not to conquer, not to win, but to gamble with the silence of the earth, and hope to leave it standing. Step back now from the crater, from the rubble, from the man crouched in the silence. The war ended long ago, the raids fell quiet, and the bombs that once whispered beneath the earth were carted away, diffused, dismantled. Yet the memory of those who silenced them rarely lingers. No statues stand in their honor. No parades march in their name. Their victories were invisible by design, measured in the streets that did not vanish, the homes that did not collapse, the cathedrals that did not fall. History remembers the Blitz in images. Firestorms across London, families huddled in shelters, the dome of street pools rising defiant above smoke. But behind those images were men with mud on their knees and soot in their lungs. Men who wagered their lives against mechanisms built for annihilation. They had no guarantee of survival, only the knowledge that someone had to kneel, someone had to listen, someone had to turn the screw. Their story is a reminder that survival often rests not in the hands of generals or kings, but in the unseen labor of ordinary men and women who carry impossible burdens. They remind us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent, crouched in the dark, unseen by the world it saves. And so, when we walk the streets of modern London paved, lit, alive with noise, we walk on ground once balanced on the edge of oblivion. The silence we enjoy now is built on their gamble then. If these stories stay with you, consider lending your voice to carry them further. A like or a subscribe helps more than you might imagine. It tells me to keep uncovering the forgotten lives history has left in the shadows, and tell me, too, where you're listening from. I find it remarkable that these echoes, whispers of fuses, drips of water, breaths held in silence, can reach across time and place, connecting us in ways those men could never have imagined. Because in the end, what it meant to be a UXB man was simple, if merciless: to kneel in silence, to listen for death, and to hope that when you rose again, the city above would still be standing.